Would you like to live without pain, suffering, or illness? Learn the secrets of achieving extraordinary health. Write down this phone number, 219-769-LIFE. That's 219-769-5433. You want more information on treatment options for you? With this edition of Inspired Living, here is Dr. Matt Hammett.
Hi, I'm Dr. Matt Hammett, and I'd like to welcome you to this presentation today, 7 reasons why kids need chiropractic care. We put together some great information, so I hope you have time to watch this and let it sink in. I hope you'll learn a ton. I know you will, and find some useful information for you to work with to move forward from here. This workshop is a central piece out of our Community Impact Program that we run at the practice. Northwest Indiana Community Impact Program is an online series of presentations about some conditions and how chiropractic care may be helpful in certain cases. It was designed to educate the community about safe, effective chiropractic care, not just back doctors, but primary doctors, which I'll explain in the presentation. These workshops are filled with stories, case studies, and neuroscience. You see, because chiropractic is not about bones, it's about neurology. It's basically neuroscience 101, which is kind of hard to teach to a lay audience. Even a general medical doctor doesn't understand, so let's get it clear. The basic science in medicine is the same for chiropractic as it is in medicine. The textbooks, for the most part, are the same. The education in science is similar. The paradigm is profoundly different. We simply look at biology through a different lens, and that lens resonates with Mother Nature. And let me explain. We're going beyond a philosophy with this. We're not just looking about and talking about innate or life force. We're looking at some neuroscience, evidence, and case studies to share information in a way that you're not going to hear anywhere else. In Northwest Indiana Community Impact, we don't have sponsors, so we can't offend anyone or sugarcoat the issue, and we simply provide the objective data with a bit of our opinion, okay? A dose of my opinion. We are entitled to an opinion. So these series are designed to encourage natural treatments for certain conditions, as well as challenge research to think outside the normal boundaries on some conditions. Our core philosophy is nature first. Now, we also authored Inspired Chiropractic a few years ago, so we are known for that book in the chiropractic community. Has been featured on numerous chiropractic publications for our work with that. We also founded the 5 Pillar Project, which is an online lifestyle-based program available for free, and a series of videos based on our newest ebook, The Pillars Blueprint. All of these videos and resources are available from our Facebook page for free, and we also have numerous other videos, some short films from the Creative Commons that inform and empower you toward action. So lots of resources and lots of information. Ignorance is not bliss, it's cancer, literally. So let's get started with this week's Northwest Indiana Community Impact Program, 7 reasons why kids need chiropractic care. First of all, let me just say this. I can't stand the fact that we have so many sick kids in the world right now. And what motivates me to take this time like this, give a presentation, create a video, write a book, or whatever it is for these 4 kids you see right here in this photo. These are my kids, and they are the reason I am and who I am today. And another reason I do what I do, I know what it's like. I witnessed my dad suffer from cancer, almost bankrupt the family, not once, but twice. I found my mother dead from a heart attack, never had a chance to say the things I would have wanted to say. I lost a brother I never knew to either a vaccine or a reaction or Tylenol, no one really knows. So there I am, a few years back, saying goodbye to my grandmother who was dying after a medical mistake, thinking back when I found my mother dead to when I wiped that last tear for my dying father. Have you experienced a phenomenon in life when you're hit with such a tragedy that the world just stops spinning for a moment? Because that happened to me. And in that moment, I didn't despair. I didn't fall to my knees in tears. In my heart, I raised my fist, vowing that I would figure this stuff out. Why so many people are suffering. Why so many die prematurely. And I was prepared to quit chiropractic and go to medical school if in my quest I found that paradigm was right. But for me, my demon was chronic disease. I just didn't see any effective treatment for chronic disease within the Western medical paradigm. And as I combed through all the so-called evidence-based medicine, I realized 84% of it was on rats. Almost all of pharmacology is based on rats, and each year's Nobel Prize winner is based on rats. Humans aren't miniature rats. So the evidence we have isn't really good evidence. Do you get that? It may be in 1909 when they standardized medicine and the scientific method to use lab rats. All they knew back then was the cell, but shame on them. After the early 60s when we discovered the DNA, why didn't we realize that every species on Earth is different in response to chemicals and toxins in their own unique way? We know that each species has a specific set of genetic requirements, and that's species-specific, which is also species-wide, so it affects all of them the same way. If you took a bat, which is nocturnal, and forced it to eat and hunt in the day and sleep at night, you'd probably kill the bat within a few days. And if the conditions on planet Earth force the bat into this practice, you kill the entire species because it is a species-wide phenomenon. That is how you put an animal, even a human animal, on the endangered list and extinction. Understand? So I realized that drugs for chronic disease, in my opinion, is not the right paradigm. That is when lifestyle medicine really began to take root in my research, and when I could apply it to my patients, later write it up in a book, The Pillar's Blueprint, that gave me new life. And I realized as a chiropractor, a physician, I was already in a place where I could make a difference in this world, and the fact is we are sick because of how we lived prior to getting sick. The confusion in healthcare is there because it's all based on rats. Our nutrition recommendations are even based on rats and animals, as well as pathology, not what I like to call healthology, a term not yet in the dictionary. I seek to change that. If we could find a way to understand health, human health, and recommend that for patients, as I am discovering in the literature, we could truly prevent most, if not all, chronic disease. For that to happen, it starts with our kids. It starts with the family. That is why the family is so important to me. That is why I'm here with you today in this conversation. While we make better choices together, these choices change the expression of our genes. And changing environment always changes physiology. You were born to be healthy. God didn't do it. And if you don't believe in God, fine. Then evolution can't do it either, because in evolution, a species evolves to a more superior form, not a sicker form. As a human species, we went from a superior species to the sickest ever. I mean ever. As you will just see in a bit. It's not about your genes. It's about your choices. And those choices aren't about willpower. It's about biology. They have caused addiction to the foods you eat toward the expression of sickness and cancer. There are numerous food documentaries on this on film. You see, I dive into this research and apply it clinically in our office, not just to take away the sickness from a child or a family, but to add something. And that something is healthology, the study of health. Not pathology, the study of sickness, but health. Confused? It's going to make sense through the course of this presentation. For now, just write down these words. It's not about what gene you have. It is all about what gene you express. And that gets determined by how well you use your 5 pillars. How well you eat, move, think, connect, and cope with stress. That is the Pillars Blueprint, a different topic already covered in previous interviews, videos, posters, and an ebook, and it's simple. But this topic is about 7 reasons your kids need chiropractic care. Specifically, we're talking about the movement pillar. You know, your 5 pillars are your foundation. They are equally important. If one of those pillars are weak, you are weak. It impacts that entire foundation. I covered this extensively, like I said before, but this conversation is about the movement pillar. Why you need a lifestyle chiropractor is part of your family's health team, and it begins the moment you're born. And for some kids, as you will learn, chiropractic care may begin in the womb. So let's begin. Getting back to my kids, let me tell you, each of these kids have their own special birth story, but this is not the time for that. Let me just tell you, each of them were adjusted before the doctors and or the nurses got the gloves on them. They were born, the baby went through my hands in which I adjusted them and then gave them to mom. This is me being selfish, but I love that I got to give that to my kids, my family, giving them health and vitality as soon as they were born in this world that way. I'm here to tell you that chiropractic care is the enzyme for the family. It's the hidden catalyst that creates that for a kid, a family, and a community. And I believe one day it will flip the switch on this, and we will see chiropractors bringing this to newborns in hospitals for the entire world. Our evidence and case studies are that good. So here we go. For that child who has been autistic for 3 years, or ADHD for 7 years, or asthma for 9 years, what ticks me off is that they missed out on those 3, 7, or 9 years of being at full health, and that you, as being their mom and dad, spent all that time with them, interacting with them in a sick way, and that's not fair. That's why we are here, to bring pediatric chiropractic to the masses. Okay, so getting into reason number 1. Most of the reasons are related to the how and the what. The reason number 1 is a bit different. This is about the lack of chiropractic being a part of too many families. So the reason you should look at chiropractic for your kids, we as a country need to look at chiropractic care for regular care. It's because, quite simply, What we have right now just isn't working. As I talk, you can read the stats. They are what they are. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know this. We are in the information age, from cell phones to iPhones to whatever. So unless you have been under a rock, you know that autism has exploded, ADHD has exploded, allergies has exploded, and on and on. The amount of illness and sickness and suffering in our kids is absolutely pandemic. The flu, bird flu, swine flu, whatever flu. They are not our current pandemic. They have never been our current pandemic, but we put them on the scale as such. Now, you may think, for example, ear infections. That's just part of kids. Everyone gets one, not a big deal, and on and on. Well, if you have 20 ear infections, you are more likely to get 20 rounds of antibiotics, which gives you a huge risk of chronic asthma, allergies, and illness for the rest of your life. Most every kid we see with autism or ADHD has comorbidities of asthma, allergies, digestive issues, constipation, acid reflux, colic, you name it. So the reason pediatric chiropractic care needs to be placed into more and more families is because what we are doing right now is not working. Just think of it as a sports. Every one of us has their favorite sports team or sport team, and professional or college or what level. And the single thing that always almost dominates the news is that the general manager or the coach or the players are not performing. They're not winning. They're not getting the job done. They get replaced. Or they change the theme, the philosophy of the game. They change the strategy or change the approach that they are taking. That's what this world needs more specifically. Our kids need more than ever. If we continue down the same path of more illness, which we're going to share with you how and why we're getting there, more kids are getting diagnosed and more kids are getting medication. And if more kids get sick and medicated, do you think we're going to get more help out of that? Or do you think we're going to get on the exact same trend where autism is exploding by 30% every year? It used to be that ADHD, one kid maybe in your class. Just think back to your generation, Mom and Dad. I remember maybe one kid having a little tough time with running or breathing issues. I remember one time with a kid with focus who needed a little extra time and help with focus. Do you remember 3 kids being nonverbal and stemming? Do you remember 5 kids with ADHD and have to go to the nurse's office to take medication? Do you remember 4 kids having to have a rescue inhaler with them all the time? Do you remember when a peanut couldn't come within a 46-mile radius from the school, or a couple of kids would go into anaphylactic shock? Ladies and gentlemen, I go through that with you to tell you that what has changed in 1 or 2 generations' times is not genetics. Medicine likes to say it's genetics or bad luck, and it's not. So reason number 2, chiropractors think differently, therefore, find different solutions, and doctors of chiropractic should be rewritten doctors of cause. And here's the key. How we think and how we understand things determines how we take actions upon things. And right now, the current Western medical thinking as far as health is concerned, they say where lack of health or sickness, where it comes from, is through what we call the gene theory or the genetic theory. It says mom and dad get together, they pass on their genes to the next generation, and if you got the ear infection gene, well, too bad, you're going to get ear infections. If you got the ADHD gene, mom has a little bit of the ADHD, so you're going to get ADHD. Well, I can't give you an entire lecture on genetics as much as I'd like to, but that's a different lecture. The truth is, it's not genetics, it's epigenetic, it's your environment, it's your 5 pillars. This is a study of how our environment and lifestyle we live in affects our genes. So certain genes are turned on or turned off, which has happened in the last generation or 2 for our kids. Is their geneticist has changed? Has their genes changed? Of course not. It takes thousands upon thousands of years for genetics to change the slightest bit, in which even then it's minuscule. What has changed drastically in this short period of time is our environment. The way that predominantly impacts chiropractic's viewpoint is that health is determined by our lifestyle and environment, and most importantly, our ability to adapt to it. Health is not random chance, it's determined by our lifestyle and our environment, and most importantly, this is another deeper layer of this conversation on this presentation, but health is really our ability to adapt to the amount of stressors we're exposed to on a daily basis. See, if you've taken any biology courses, you know this sort of stuff. And if you look at biology and adaptation and all these sorts of things, that's what really happens. The healthiest, the old saying, strongest survive. That is true. Our kids are getting faced with what we call a double-edged sword. We live in a stressful and toxic world like never before. At the same time, due to this, one thing I'm going to talk to you about in this presentation, this thing that's happened is lowering their ability to adapt, which is lowering their resilience, lowering the function of the nervous system, and all the other systems of the body that's supposed to be able to overcome that day-to-day challenge that's out there in our lifestyle and environment. So essentially, our kids are getting hit heavier, more, and earlier than ever by both sides of the coin. There's more stress and toxicity coming at them from our environment. At the same time, their ability to adapt and know what to do, which is lower than ever, that creates a recipe for sickness, disease, and all the bullet points and all the statistics you saw on the previous slide. So the take-home point from this number 2 reason is that if we really want more health, each family needs to have a doctor who is an expert in just that, health. If you want more health for your family, one of the simplest ways, and we encourage our families to do, is you still need to have a sickness and disease doctor. See, the current line of thinking that when something goes bad, we need to mend that part, put that back together, use surgery, use medication, those sorts of things. There's a time and place for that. In the United States of America, we have the greatest crisis and emergency system in the world. It ain't cheap, but it's really, really good. Broken bones, failing organs, that sort of thing. The use of medicine in an emergency crisis standpoint is amazing. I think most of us know firsthand these doctors are heroes. They are lifesavers. Thank God for them. The truth is, I wouldn't be able to help restore and repair your health if they didn't save your life in the first place. That last statement is the key. See, most families are relying on a general practitioner or a pediatric practitioner to be their coach, to be their general manager and head coach for their children's health. But the truth for the matter is, while those folks are amazing, they're caring, but they are trained with sickness and disease, and that's what their expertise is in. So the more you go to a person who is an expert in one thing, the more likely you're going to get that sort of result. And what we think the world really strongly needs is 2 doctors on their healthcare team. Specifically for kids, we need 2 pediatric specialists, one for crisis sickness intervention, because sometimes it's going to happen. And the other is to have a doctor, a coach, a general manager who is an expert in health promotion and health restoration in that manner. What we found over 12 years into doing this, many families who operate as such with 2 doctors on their healthcare team, the more you see the health restoration doctor, the pediatric family chiropractic doctor, the less you need to see this other type of doctor because your kids are healthy and not sick. They're actively engaged and living well, and so they stay well. Now that is a huge shift in thinking, and we understand that is a radical shift in normal societal thinking nowadays, but here's the real deal. If we stick with the path we're on in current societal thinking, leading us down the current actions, we will get the same results. Why wouldn't we? In fact, I could end this presentation with that, but I won't. Insanity is defined as doing the same things and expecting different results. Good luck with that. We need to do different things if we want to get better and get different results. Here's a cool little picture and a saying that goes with it. What we've done, we've created this very advanced lab-generated, technology-generated, money-generated healthcare system that has a lot of advancement to it in terms of technology, but in my opinion, it's also one of the most antiquated and outdated systems of our time because we've lost our way by having too much bad information. Just because we have random controlled trial studies that provide the best scientific evidence on rats and animals does not mean that they will work that way when you give it to a human. The best immune system for a child, it's built in the body, it's not built in the lab, and our children certainly are not rats. If you've never been exposed to chiropractic care before, and even if you've been to chiropractic in the past, whether it's pain-based or intuition-based or other versions of chiropractic care other than true blue period chiropractic, you maybe haven't come across this term before. But reason number 3 that you should seek out chiropractic care for the kids is that, truth be told, most kids are subluxated from birth. And what the heck is the word in the middle of that sentence? Let me break it apart for you. Subluxations is a nerdy, goofy kind of Star Trek Spocky type of chiropractic word. You don't really need to remember the word, but you need to remember what it is and, most importantly, what it does. Subluxation is the way we like to teach it. Really has 3 parts. The first 2 parts are more physical or biomechanical or structural in nature, and we are talking about specifically subluxation of the spine and the first 2 parts of that. They are misalignment. When you have something that becomes misaligned, think about if you're sitting in a room that has a door on it, and if you imagine you can take the hinges out of the door and you misalign it so it's not flush, and you kind of jam them and twist them a little bit, now the door not only becomes misaligned and off kilter with the frame, but if you go to swing the door, it becomes stuck and it becomes stiff. We've all kind of experienced that with the car door, another door, or something getting damaged in that sense. That's the physical or mechanical component, are the first 2 parts of subluxation. The third part of subluxation is by far the most important. The third part that even most chiropractors don't understand and talk enough about, and we really want to translate this conversation to its role in the developing brain and nervous system of a small child and how that affects the general and overall well-being of a child. And so the third part of the subluxation, after you have a misalignment, after you have a fixation, you get neurological interference. So it messes with the neurological mechanisms related to that joint. Now, I'm going to show you a picture and talk about something on the next slide that really explains this, but chiropractic is really simple to understand. The body, the nervous system, our physiology is one of the most vast, complex stuff that we know a lot about, and thanks to nowadays technologies, inventions, and scientific research. But what we know about how it really operates is actually very small because it's complex and vast. And they said you could spend over 100 years just writing down everything that happens in 1 second of a cell, and we have over 100 trillion cells in our bodies. That's not even the beginning, because we have 3 times that in our microbiome, our bacteria that live in symbiosis with us. They say the first living cell came into being nearly 40 million centuries ago, and its direct descendants are in all of our bloodstreams. Literally, you are breathing molecules this very second that were inhaled by Moses, Mother Teresa, and Jesus. And we are vastly interconnected. Our fates are inseparable. We are here because the dream of every cell is to become 2 cells, and dreams come true. And each of you are 1 quadrillion cells, 90% of which are not human cells. Your body is a community, an ecosystem. And without those other microorganisms, you would perish in hours. And each human cell has 400 billion molecules conducting millions of processes between trillions of atoms. So the total cellular activity in one human body is staggering. It's mind-blowing. 1 quadrillion actions at any one moment. In a millisecond, our body has undergone 10 times more processes than there are stars in the universe, which is exactly what Charles Darwin foretold when he said science would discover that each living creature was a little universe formed of a host of self-propagating organisms inconceivably minute and as numerous as the stars of heaven. So I have 2 questions for you all. First, can you feel your body? Stop for a moment, feel your body, 1 quadrillion activities going on simultaneously, and your body does this so well you are free to ignore it. You can feel it, it's called life. This is who you and I are. Second question, who's in charge of your body? Who is managing those molecules? Hopefully not a political party, a special interest group like Big Food and Big Pharma. Life is creating the conditions that are conducive to life inside you, just as in all of nature. Our innate nature is to create the conditions that are conducive to life. What I want you to imagine is that collectively humanity is evincing a deep innate wisdom and coming together to heal the wounds and insults of the past. That is just a part of the vastness and complexities of what you and I really are. What we know about chiropractic really operates is actually it's neuroscience, which is like studying rocket science, isn't it? The truth is, a neuroscientist is better able to understand chiropractic than a general practitioner or a general medical doctor. That is also true for dentistry. You wouldn't ask your general medical doctor to look you into the mouth, clean your teeth for you, and then analyze your teeth for cavities. That's true for dentistry as it is for chiropractic. Your general provider is not trained in dentistry or chiropractic, therefore not familiar with the technical terms and sciences of each. Trust me, I know. My father-in-law and brother-in-law are dentists, so I know firsthand. As a parent, you need to know this because you are just banging your head on the table if you expect a general medical doctor or a general pediatrician to help you with a chiropractic problem. Got it? Here is what you need to know, moms and dad, especially related to kids. Truth be told, most kids are subluxated from birth. Most people think of the spine as a hunk of muscles, ligaments, and bones. They think of it as a physical, bony, mechanical sort of structure, when actually it's very complex, as I just shared earlier. It's really a living biological entity, and in fact, these tissues I just mentioned are actually made up of cells. Each of these cells has its own brain, heart, and respiration. It's a biological living entity, interweaved like millions of spider webs, all put together, all impacting all sorts of living things within our being. Truth be told, we in science don't know the first of it. Now, in an anatomical sense, calling it a hunk of bones, muscles, and ligaments, etc., is how they like to describe it. But if you look at its location, if you look at what it is within the spine and what it is within the skull and the spine's job is to house and protect the central nervous system. So in its anatomical form, yes, it's bones, muscles, and ligaments. But what you have to understand about the spine is the conduit. The spine is the communication channel, the protector that's integrated in such an amazingly important way to the communication and connections of the central nervous system. And so when your spine does not move properly, you get subluxated, misalignments, jamming up the hinges, because it's so intimately connected to the central nervous system. You get neurological interference. And when you get neurological interference, you get sicker. Why do I throw this right off the bat? Because most kids are subluxated from birth. That is what we have to really look at. What's changed in this last generation or two in a massive way is the way we bring children into the world. If you look at the picture on the left, I know it's not the prettiest or nicest looking slide by any means, and I promise you the video we're going to see in the next slide or two is going to be even a little more graphic and dramatic, and it's intentional to do that. Because here's a simple way of understanding this. When your baby is brought into this world, if your baby is an hour old, a week old, months old, it doesn't matter with even a grown child. Imagine that. Again, even if your kids are older, imagine back when they were tiny and they were really a brand new little baby. They were sitting in the car seat and someone walked over. A grown adult man or female walked over, went to a little baby in the car seat, picked them up, put their hand under their head and neck, and another hand under their chin and face, and picked them up and pulled them out of that car seat. What would happen? What would you do to that man or woman who did that? You would pick them up by their head and neck and throw them out of your house, because everybody in the world knows that the neck and the skull are the single most crucial, important, must be protected areas of an infant. Reason being is because that area of the skull and spine, the cervical spine and the neck, as we call it, houses and protects the single most important piece and part of the nervous system, where all the information from the environment goes through the nervous system into the brain, and everything from the brain goes to the body. So what you're looking at, there's at the picture on the left is a picture of a child, one of my colleagues' patients actually, and this is a C-section delivery. That is a child being born by way of C-section. If you look at this chart here on the right, this is one of the biggest reasons this chart really says a lot about why pediatric chiropractic is needed in the world, more so than ever, and it's really quite simple. In the late 70s and 80s, 5%, 10%, declining, maybe up to 15% of kids were born by way of C-section. In the last generation, that has tripled, and some hospitals quadrupled and more. We're now at about 33%, 35%. Some hospitals are 40%, some are 50%. Some regions, some countries are even pushing when 100% of children are born by way of C-section. We've been kind of schooled a little bit into thinking that C-sections can actually be safer, calmer, easier on the child, but it's not. And we can't go through this in exact detail for the sake of time in this presentation. That's a big conversation for another time. But this is where, along with C-sections and the use of other tons of interventions from medications to forceps deliveries to vacuum extraction deliveries to long, difficult deliveries where the doctor, the midwife, may have to get in and really do a lot of pulling, straining. There's so much what we call pulling up traction, twisting, and pulling that happens to a baby's skull and spine, and specifically their neck during this process, this birth process, that in over 12 years of having a strong pediatric practice, I can tell you the vast majority of children that we have checked are subluxated from birth. The more significant and the more severe the intervention, emergency C-section, forceps, etc., the more severe and significant, the more likely they're going to have a subluxation. So again, I spend a lot of time on that, but if there's one take-home point that you can't miss, this is kind of where we're really in the meat of the presentation right here. And there's one thing you can't miss, it's really the fact that from the beginning of life, it's quite likely that your kid has a subluxation, has that misalignment, has that interference to the function of the nervous system, their brain and their body, and its communication network from the beginning. And again, like I said, the more stuff that happens if they were breached and uterine constraint, early preterm delivery, emergency C-section, the more stuff that happens during that time, it's a pretty easy transition for you to be able to see the more likely that subluxation, that misalignments is in there, and then also more likely that it's pretty significant. But really every kid, this is just the beginning. Really every kid, this is just something that we feel every kid should be checked for, because a big one is no good and a little one is no good the same. Now, they may have different correlations to that, but long story short, let's take a look here at what, in our opinion, is a very big creation of a big subluxation early in life. And what I like to say with this conversation to set the stage, if you've heard the saying before that a picture is worth 1,000 words, well, this video is worth 10,000 and 100,000 and 1,000,000. So I know many of you have had, let me just please reiterate this. What we're talking about this again, the meat of this conversation today, every single birth the child has, that the family has, that the mother has, is the birth that happened at that time with that set of circumstances, with that set of information, with that set of understanding, and it's exactly what it was and needs to be. When we're having the conversation and what we're bringing this forward to, and what we're going to do in a second is watch a video of a C-section delivery. I don't want this to be anything other than what it is. We have to look back in a kid's case history, and especially if they're sick and they're suffering, we have to do what we call CSI, and we have to peel back the layers and say, why is this kid sick? What is happening? Why is their nervous system fried? Why is their immune system malfunctioning? Why are they getting chronic ear infections? Why are they so sick? As a parent, when something is wrong with your kid, you care more about the why more than you care about the what. We're all wired that way. So I got to give you a fair warning when I talked about C-sections, when we talk about the background and the perfect storm of how a kid gets sick. It kind of stinks sometimes. Sometimes it's the first time for a lot of parents, for most parents, that we get to talk about, because this is not an understanding, because it's not in the education of pediatricians, obstetricians, or a medical doctor. Otherwise, they would be doing something about it. If they knew about it, but they don't. Remember what I said about dentistry a bit ago when I compared their education with the general medical doctor. So a lot of times when we go through that case history and we teach folks who really have it for the first time to see that really the path to their kid getting sick, it's emotional. But I really want to give you a long kind of buffering into this video and this conversation to say it's emotional, because I understand for a lot of times it finally puts the pieces of the puzzle together as to why your kids may be sick and suffering from anything from an ear infection to ADHD. But I hope that you can take this information, and I promise that's where the last few minutes in this presentation is going to go, and take this information, and it can be emotional for really two reasons. One, you can look back and for the first time finally have some answers that says, man, that's what my kid maybe has these challenges, and gone from this to colic to reflux to ear infections to antibiotics to inhalers to hyperactivity and compulsiveness to speech issues to social issues to anxiety, and this whole path of the perfect storm. And looking back sometimes really stinks, because you start to see these steps and the ingredients that cause it, and absolutely you wish, man, if I had known what I know now. Yes, that's there. But most importantly is to take this set of information during this presentation and all the conversations we have with our community, patients and parents, and say, well, now that we have the information, now what we know exactly why something happened, and we know exactly what is going on, now we know exactly what to do about it. And that's the intro. That's the whole template of this conversation and presentation. There's information, and then there's action steps that need to come back on that side of it. So I got quite a bit ahead of myself with all that, but just it's just so important. Before I show you this video, in a way, I wanted you to be shocked, and I wanted you to see, because the world just needs to wake up and know what's happening to our kids, to our children, and know exactly how paramount and essential getting checked for subluxation is, and getting it taken care of when it's there. So I want you to watch this video. It's probably the longest lead up I've ever given to this video, but I want you to watch this and forget about all the words and bullet points and the terms, subluxation, misalignments, and all that. Anything and everything, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about when you watch this video. And remember, this is a suction during delivery, so the child's going to be pulled up, and for that in a certain manner, and just listen to how they talk through this.
Getting irritated. Oh, there you go, little fella.
Come on, buddy.
All right. Ears of a girl. Ears of a girl. Make you cute for the camera.
Oh, man. Keep coming back. He's coming back.
There you go.
So again, if we carry on this conversation forward, what happens there is that, again, that is now a third or more of our children being entered into this world by C-section. I'll just tell you like in very plain English, the way it is, about a third to sometimes half the kids being entered into this world are literally being pulled into this world by their head and their neck. If that happens in any other setting, at any other place, at any other time in history, it would literally be shocking. that would literally be a major issue that nobody needed a chiropractic lecture or presentation to tell them about, that that's an issue. And that occurs for the vast majority of our kids. So here's the path, and then we'll kind of complete this conversation and give you something to do about it. When a child is either suffering from in utero constraint issues, which is a whole other topic for the pregnancy, because our women during pregnancy are put into a more fearful and stressful and emotional state than ever before in history. Their body is tight, constricted, and subluxated, and a lot of times that child becomes malpositioned and constrained in there, and a lot of times subluxations, these kinks within the spine and neck, if you will, actually show up in utero. But then if we go through C-section delivery, if we go through forceps, if we go through vacuum, if we go through long, difficult delivery with any twisting and pulling, there creates a misalignment or subluxation into the top of the neck and the spine and the skull specifically, and early signs of subluxation as mentioned a couple of times earlier. But early signs of subluxations in a child are difficult in nursing, so they have a tough time turning and latching because the nerves that come from the upper neck are the nerves that are responsible for turning the skull and the neck. They're responsible for the tongue, the jaw, and the swallowing. They're responsible for the top parts of digestion. So therefore, when we see interference with these nerves from subluxations from the birth injury and the birth process, early in life, we see colic, we see breastfeeding difficulties, we see reflux. That's a lot of time goes to constipation because the nervous system controls digestion motility. The more outward, the more kind of present appearances that some of your kids may have gone through early on or going through now are torticollis, where the neck is literally physically stuck in one position. It's plagiocephaly, where they have a flattening of the head, where they have to do a helmet and physical therapy because the ears, the nose, and the throat are all right here, and because ear infections are not caused by a lack of antibiotics, but they're caused by a lack of proper drainage and neuroimmune function. When you have this misalignment and this subluxation and interference up there, you have a high propensity for ear infections, sinus infections. Kids are getting a ton of antibiotics, they're getting ear tubes or tonsils, and adenoids are locked out. Then they'll be conned. Instead of having a cold for 2 days, they get it for 2 weeks. Instead of having normal breathing in the spring and in the fall, being able to go outside and play outside, they can't do it without their inhaler, on and on and on. Those are the signs of subluxation. So I've covered this in quite a bit of detail. I tend to be, you'll see in the next little bit, we talked about just briefly about ADHD, sensory processing, and these sort of things. And in that world, we have what you call raging bull and drunken bulls. I'm a bit of a raging bull. I get a bit of what we call passionate. It's a word we've made up in our work. It's a mix of passionate and pissed off. So being a raging bull and being as I am with this information and how obsessed I am with helping kids, I pretty much explained all this already, but chiropractic is scientific. Reason number 4 why you should really look at chiropractic care for your kids is, despite what the world has told you over and over again about chiropractic being unscientific, that is as far from the truth as it can possibly be. Chiropractic is very advanced in science, and thanks to the advent of technology, chiropractic has been around for 120 years, and if you read the understanding of the scientific interpretation as to how chiropractic worked 100 plus years ago, it's light years away from where medicine is right now. But here's what's really cool. Medicine is starting to catch up. So this statement right here, I should say that medical research is starting to catch up, and really thanks to the advent of technology. Just like really in any other industry, in any other form, the advent of technology is just proving and showing even more of the science in chiropractic than we ever could. The stuff that we always knew, how we can finally start to see and understand at a deeper level. But this is just a great quote to understand the science of chiropractic. The function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and to coordinate the behavior of all the other cells. And that image right here is one to see over and over in our office. And really what it's showing is, again, job of the spine is more than just to set the bones. It is a living, breathing neurological organ. And these nerves of these wires are fused, if you will. We call it our fuse box poster because it really shows how the nervous system in our body works. And the nervous system doesn't just control some other cells and organs and tissues, it controls every single other part of the body. It is the hard drive, it is electricity, it is the air traffic control for the entire body. It's probably the best way we can really teach people how to understand how the nervous system works in the brain and nervous system as a whole. So the central nervous system, we also call the autonomic nervous system, are really the air traffic control for the entire body. And they are perceiving all of the activity, all of the senses that are coming in from the environment. So all the stuff that's out there, they are then coordinating and deciding and making decisions inside the brain. And that takes the information in through the peripheral nervous system and through the sensory nerves. And that information comes into the spine, goes up or north, if you will, and it then coordinates and organizes and decides upon within the main part of the brain, which with what all kind of how this nervous system, that's the correlation, and then the determination is made. So that signal is sent right back down through the spinal cord and the spinal nerves out to every tissue, cell, and organ in the body to control and coordinate and modulate its behavior. So the other major systems of the body, the immune system, the digestive system, the respiratory system, every single one of them is completely under the control of the central nervous system. And there is crosstalk and there is constant communication, but there is a boss of the body, and it is the brain and the central nervous system. So in the very short form, in a graphic form, if you can see where my mouse is, on this, if we have an injury, especially to where all this information is coming in and going out, is processed. So if the nervous system is in air traffic control, moms and dads, you've got to understand this part of the spine and nervous system called the brainstem in the upper cervical area is the air traffic control tower. So if you mess with that, you mess up with the issues. You mess up with the tissues and issues that are coming in and going out, and this communication, you really alter the perception and the coordination ability of the nervous system. Therefore, you alter the behavior of all other cells, because this area right here, this hard drive, this air traffic control, is where respiration and immune function is determined from. It's where cardiovascular function is determined from. It's where digestive function is determined from. They're the controls and modulates everything. Okay, so what about brain fog? Chiropractic science and ADHD, sensory processing disorder, autism spectrum, sleep disorders, etc. Well, I already did 2 Northwest Indiana Community Impact events on both sleep disorders and ADD or ADHD events, but very quickly, let me summarize it here. The attention system doesn't claim a central address in the brain. Rather, it's a diffuse web of reciprocal pathways that begins at the locus coeruleus, the arousal center, a part of the brainstem, and sends signals throughout the brain to wake it up and cue our attention. And the network engages such areas as the reward center, the limbic system, and the cortex in the brain. And more recently, scientists have included the cerebellum, which governs balance and movement. And it turns out that there's a lot of overlap between attention, consciousness, and movement. And the attention circuits are jointly regulated by the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and dopamine, which are so similar on a molecular level that they can plug into each other's receptors. And these are the chemicals targeted by ADHD medications. And of the many genes correlated with the disorder, scientists focus on the ones that regulate these 2 neurotransmitters. Broadly speaking, the problem for people with ADHD is that their attention system is patchy. They describe it as discontinuous, fragmented, and uncoordinated. Problems that can stem from a dysfunction with either of these neurotransmitters or in any one of the brain areas in the system. Scientific research from Drs. Fernandez and Noda concluded that it is muscular compression of structures, arterial and neurological, which is the causal factor in the lack of dopamine production. And they suggest a causal link between upper cervical subluxations causing compression of neurovascular structures at the base of the skull and or further down to the base of the neck where it meets the shoulders. And this is exactly what we just watched happen to the baby in our video, which is showing to 1/3 of the kids every day being born. See, other research demonstrates children with ADHD exhibit postural distortions and associated movement deficits of the upper cervical spine. And it found that following chiropractic care applied to the upper cervical spine, not only does postural deficits resolve in the children, but so does concentration and cognitive abilities. And as such, visual concentration span and thus reading difficulties are improved immediately following spinal adjustments. Other studies, such as smaller trauma, just like falling from a swing with no other traumas, children showed persistent postural asymmetry and insufficient gross motor functions. Attention span was short and impulsive when assigned tasks. Chiropractic care corrected the postural deficit and motor coordination improved, and verbal capacities and visual components became better. And what is interesting to this study was that when children stopped chiropractic care and the postural asymmetry and insufficient gross motor functions returned, so did the ADHD problem. And after the relapse was corrected with chiropractic care, the ADHD also improved with the posture and gross motor function improving, thereby showing the need for regular chiropractic care with kids with ADHD, not for pain, but for attention concentration problems. So that is just some of our research on ADD and ADHD, and you can watch the replay event on Facebook for more detail. Let me explain the two neurological mechanisms that adjustments have on sleep, or the calming mechanism. This is done in research over 20 years ago. It suggests that chiropractic spinal manipulation care, or adjustments, affect two neurological pathways. One pathway involves a special neuron called GABA. At the same time, a second pathway is ignited called the sleep switch. The first pathway involves type 1 and 2 mechanoreceptors by exciting the GABA neuron, which is a specialized neuron that interrupts the transmission of nerve impulses from the thalamus to the limbic system. The thalamus is where the extensive nerve networks that send signals all around the structures of the brain, including the cerebral cortex. It's involved in sensory and motor signal relay and the regulation of consciousness and sleep. And the limbic system is involved in motivation, emotion, learning, and memory. At the same time, the thalamus and limbic system engages, a second pathway exists called the sleep switch. It's in the dorsal column where the alpha and beta fibers, or other specialized nerve fibers, stimulates the hypothalamus. Now, the hypothalamus is responsible for the process of falling asleep. And this structure, and in particular its preoptic area, appears to be sensitive to the serotonin released during waking periods. Apparently, when serotonin stimulates this preoptic area of the anterior hypothalamus, its GABAergic neurons, in turn, inhibit the posterior hypothalamus, thus encouraging sleep. Damage to these GABAergic neurons is known to cause insomnia, whereas stimulating them causes experimental subjects to fall asleep rapidly. Now, the preoptic area in the hypothalamus houses something called the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus. I know a big bunch of science here, but hang on, just bear with me. I love this stuff. A dense cluster of neurons that become active when non-rapid eye movement sleep is initiated. That's the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus. So 80% of these neurons that contain specialized enzymes, and these enzymes are known to inhibit the locus coeruleus, the descending projection from the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, which is likely to be inhibitory in nature and allows relaxation. I'm getting there, just relax. Allows relaxation of the mind, thus promoting non-rapid eye movement sleep. So if this specialized nucleus within the hypothalamus is stimulated by the alpha-beta fibers, normal proprioception will have an effect on the nucleus. In other words, the chiropractic adjustments have an effect on this nucleus following an adjustment because proprioceptive input by the adjustment stimulates these alpha and beta nerve special fibers, which activates the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus so that non-rapid eye movement sleep can initiate. In fact, a PubMed journal, Trends in Neuroscience, published an article naming this alpha-beta fiber stimulation into the hypothalamus the sleep switch. So the neurological pathways following the chiropractic adjustment have been drawn up and initiate two neurological mechanisms. First, the preoptic area in the hypothalamus initiating non-rapid eye movement sleep due to GABA and other specialized enzymes that enable relaxation. And the second mechanism involves initiating the sleep switch so non-rapid eye movement sleep can initiate. Okay? Got that out of my system. See, that's kind of a Star Trek nerd Spock kind of answer. I hope it helps, or I hope it didn't bore you. Let's get back into a little more simpler language, shall we? I got sidetracked. All right, back to our story. Now, this was on the cover of Scientific American just this March, and now we have a couple of quotes from the article in New York Times Magazine last year talking about this majorly important nerve that controls and coordinates all of this. It's called the vagus nerve, which is really the number one most important nerve in the body because it has the most vast functions. It's called the wandering nerve, right? School, I used to call it the wandering nerve. Okay, anyway, because it goes to so many different parts and pieces of the body, and it's also drastically majorly important in this conversation I'm having with you right now, because the vagus nerve is the vagus nerve is see the yellow nerve right here. It branches and leaves the brainstem about a centimeter or two away from the top bone in the neck, and it goes all the way down through the neck into the top 2/3 of the thoracic cavity, and it controls our heartbeat, respiration, digestion, controls our immune function, and we are now starting to understand that it controls everything from speech to our social responses, to our emotional responses. Therefore, it's been researched in a major way. And not just in movement and physical issues, but everything from autism to anxiety to ADHD, and it's huge. So I don't usually like to read some slides, but I think this one is pretty important and pretty cool to be able to do that. And it says, the vagus nerve and its branches conduct nerve impulses called action potentials to every major organ. But communication between nerves and the immune system was considered impossible. according to the scientific consensus in 1998. What we have demonstrated was the nervous system was like a computer terminal through which you could deliver commands to stop a problem like acute inflammation before it starts, or repair body after it gets sick. All of the information is coming and going as electrical signals. That's what this article in Scientific America has talked about. They are now using stimulation of the vagus nerve and the nervous system to control everything from mood to, most importantly for this conversation, to inflammation, which is really the root of all other physiological diseases, from an ear infection to asthma, allergies, and other sorts of autoimmune diseases. So that is how chiropractic helps with all those things. So this kind of the last statement from this article says, Tracy's efforts have helped establish that is now the growing field of bioelectronics. He has grand hopes for it. And I think this is the industry that will replace the drug industry. And I bold that, but pause on that for a second. I am, when we read this information and see this sort of information and research what's out there, I'm right up the same river as this guy. But you're going to see that our suggestion, instead of electrical implants into your child's neck and nervous system, we can use chiropractic adjustments. And I'll show you that in just a second. Well, actually, we already talked about that earlier with sleep and ADHD. But I love this statement because, quite honestly, this goes back to the reason number one. There's a time and place for drugs. Absolutely. Always will be. Thank God we have them. But at the same time, if continuing to throw more drugs and give more kids more diagnosis and more labels was going to get us more health, we'd be there already. Because our kids take more drugs and are more medicated than they ever have in human history. So we don't maybe need to necessarily replace the drug industry, and again, because there's always a time and place, but we need to flip the order. What happens is, and we joke all the time, and it's a joke we actually don't like, that's the reality. There's staff up here at the office who answer the phone. Welcome to the last resort. Because usually by the time folks try pediatric chiropractic care for their child, they've been everywhere. They've been to the neurologist. They've been to the immunologist. They've been to 3 different pediatricians. They've tried 4 different medications. They've had 30 rounds of antibiotics. They've done OT, PT, speech, biomedical interventions. They've done it all. Yet the child is still sick and suffering. And the reason for that is kind of sad right here too. He says, today researchers are creating implants that can communicate directly with the nervous system in order to try to fight everything from cancer to the common cold. And that last statement is a heck of a bold statement, but it's actually an accurate statement because the nervous system is so tied into every single system in the body that when you get the nervous system of a child or a person well, you get the body well. Our suggestion just varies a little bit from Dr. Tracy. Rather than surgical implants ticked up to a Bluetooth and BlackBerry, what I'd like you to know is that chiropractic adjustments are designed not to just put out of place bones back in place. They're designed to stimulate the nervous system into its healing, restorative, reparative ways. Okay, so the next step here, reason number 5 that your kids need chiropractic care is a little bit of a specific need. If you have a child that has a specific challenge here, anywhere in kind of just alphabet soup of things, from autism spectrum disorder to ADHD, sensory processing disorder, learning disabilities, this kind of whole host of things that are in this neurological realm are something that are so responsive, so favorably, it's so wonderful, the chiropractic. And I add this here in number 5 here because, again, it's a specialty within the specialty of our practice of pediatrics, and it's just something that we're really kind of at the forefront of clinical experience and application, scientifically understanding, and interpretation. Honestly, starting to put forth some amazing research to this stuff too. So reason number 5, if you have a kid who's been diagnosed in this world of autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, learning disabilities, and more, the nervous system, as we just got done teaching and going through this, the nervous system controls and coordinates the functioning behavior of all other pieces and parts of the body. Therefore, when the nervous system goes haywire, when it malfunctions, when it's subluxated, as we say, for one kid, it may go down to the world of attention deficit hyperactive disorder and hyperactivity, and for another kid, it may go down the world of messing with their immune system and cause asthma and allergies. For another kid, it may go and mess with their digestive system and cause chronic stomach pains or constipation and indigestion. and these sorts of issues. And for another whole set of kids, it causes all those things and more. And that's generally what we see with this group of kids, is that they have their primary issue, if you will, these neurological issues, these brain-based issues. And then with that, because the nervous system ties into the immune system, the digestive system, and the endocrine, and the hormonal system in such a way that they have major issues there too. So let's talk about the root of it, the cause. DC, Doctor of Chiropractic, means Doctor of Cause. Let's talk about the nervous system just here for a few minutes and show you how chiropractic helps so much with these kids, and it's really quite simple and easy to understand. We're not going to use Star Trek Spock style, I promise. The first thing that we do with the kid, we take a very thorough case history going through the path that caused them to get sick and get that diagnosis. Then they're looking at that case history. We're looking for what we call the 3 different categories of stress. And in chiropractic, for over 120 years, we've called them the 3 T's. So the first T is the physical trauma or the physical stress or strain, and that would be the birth injury. Again, think about that. You may think my kid didn't have any major falls or any car accidents. Well, as we just went through, it's the birth process, even in utero. That really is where it happens for the vast majority of kids and adults when you grow up that way. The second T is a whole different 6-hour conversation. That would be the toxins our kids are going through. It's more so than we have when we were a kid. And this stuff is in the environment. It's our foods, medications, you name it. Industrial products, household products. Our kids are being bombarded more so than any other time in human history. And scientifically, we are finding it in the fetal blood during the developmental process. And as I like to say, it's not genetic, it's epigenetic. It's the environment. It's your 5 pillars. And the third T, maybe not that big of an influence on the child when we are younger, but for sure, don't underestimate this. That is our thoughts. Don't misconstrue this, because by the time the child is aged 5, then 7, then 8, and on, they're being told they have ADHD, there's something wrong with you, you need to take a medication, and by the time they have struggled at school and have had issues with that, kids can have a ton of emotional stress and shame with that. And so what happens, these 3 T's, these stressors, they add up. And what happens is the job of the nervous system is to perceive the environment. So there's a ton of stress, those perfect storm ingredients early on in life, beginning with a forceps or a C-section delivery, a ton of ear infections that lead to a ton of antibiotics, a ton of junk food from processed foods, all this stuff adding up, what we call bioaccumulation, or accumulating toxins in our biology. And this is what happens with the nervous system. So think of the nervous system, again, as an air traffic control for the entire body. The nervous system really has 2 modes of operation. One mode of operation is the accelerator mode, or the stress response, the fight or flight response. It's really good mode of response if your child is going to soccer practice and going to be running around and playing soccer. And it's a system that is designed to be turned on and turned off. The flip side of this is the decelerator mode, or the parasympathetic mode, or the rest and healing mode, and growth and digestion mode. A healthy child is going to spend the vast majority of the time in that decelerator mode in this day and age. It's like applying the brakes of a car. So as those 3 T's, those stressors, build and build, think of your child's nervous system and the brain, just like the engine in your car. As that stress level goes up, that engine revs up. Those RPMs, or stress on the engine, goes up, and that is the accelerator mode. In short term, playing soccer, that's fine, but long term, it's not. So this subluxation that we talked about here and how the spine and nervous system work, the spine is more than a hunk of bones, ligaments, muscles, and nerves. It's actually a living biological entity. And in fact, each cell that makes up this system has its own heart, brain, and respiration. They are an ecosystem of cells living in symbiosis with us. There's also a living and breathing neurological element that houses and protects the central nervous system, and it controls and coordinates that communication between the brain and the body, and then the body to the brain. So this infographic, if you will, is going to help illustrate that word subluxation. Remember, anytime you hear the word subluxation, think stressor. So we have 2 key physical elements to subluxation. We talked about that early, misalignment and subluxation. The third part of that subluxation, which in my opinion is the most important, is the neurological element. And the third element is the nervous system gets stimulated in that fight or flight system, or the accelerator mode. So as the stress response builds, the accelerator mode, the adrenal glands get turned on. Unhealthy hormones occur to keep up with the stress load, and so the nervous system gets stuck in this fight or flight response. So the very beginning, as your child gets stuck in this accelerator mode, now she or he, however years old they are, they start seeing that these things that teachers and others are calling them ADHD or behavior issues, and so they may say she has some sensory issues, then she may be 2 or 3 and have ear infections and given antibiotics or drugs to calm things down, but these things may be adding to the second part of the T, because medications are still toxins. The key differences between a medical pediatrician and a chiropractic pediatrician is we're looking at the exact same stuff, but we are looking at it through a different biological lens. Rather than saying, oh, she has this, so take that, and only working on the effects, only addressing the output, we go back, way back, and look all the way back and ask, why? Why is it happening? What is causing this? And what do we do to stop it? So the stress response, because the nervous system controls every other system in the body, when it is stressed, for one child, it may be a headache, for another, maybe an ear infection, for another, constipation, or another behavior issues, or all of these things. We don't care about the output, we care about the input. If that input into the CNS is stress, 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 or subluxation, 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 this is the sort of stuff we're going to get. Now, we do pay attention to these outputs like a medical doctor does, and we absolutely want to help you get rid of them. So the way we do that is we go back to the inputs, the causes. We got to get to the decelerator mode. We got to get to the brakes of the car working again. So when we correct those subluxations, as we know exactly where to go and how to work on repairing these, we have to activate and build up that decelerator mode. So we can't just go and pull wires out and stop the accelerator mode altogether, because these two systems work inversely proportional to each other. We like to say that nerves that fire together wire together. And this child's system, all it knows is stress, stress, stress. So what we have to do is get back to the decelerator mode and reactivate the system. So what the adjustment does, it gets rid of that subluxation, getting rid of that stress. By doing that, we turn on the decelerator mode, the rest and healing, digestion and growth mode, and promote healing so the nervous system can calm down and begin healing. So keep this in mind. You can't be in growth and protection at the same time. And what that means is that you can't apply the accelerator mode and decelerator mode at the exact same time. So to get your child better, we got to get him or her back on the brake pedal, the growth and healing mode. The only way to stop the gas pedal is by turning on the brake pedal. For that, moms and dads, you need a pediatric chiropractor. This is where we get into how we are so unique in our brand of lifestyle chiropractic. So the way we help kids get off the gas pedal, out of the accelerator mode, and away from all this junk is we reactivate, re-stimulate, and turn the other mode on. The things you need to know, mom and dad, is that with these two systems, nerves that fire together, wire together. So they become very hardwired into this state. But the child may be rewired and programmed with continued adjustments that restore balance to the central nervous system. That is how we get the eustachian tubes to drain, and how we get the alpha and beta waves in the brain to get back in sync to help with ear infections, ADD and ADHD. And we can stimulate the sleep switch to calm your kids down so they can sleep better. That's nut and bolts of chiropractic. Chiropractic is cost effective. We understand that in today's day and age, if we go back to reason number 1, not only is our healthcare system not working, we have the worst health care system. We're like 44th in overall health findings as a nation, with some third world countries beating us. Again, that's because the people in charge of our health, all the way down to our kids, are not experts in health. They are experts in sickness and disease, crisis intervention. That's reason number 1. And number 2, that the people who are in charge of our health know everything about sickness and disease, but they don't know anything about creating health. The truth of the matter is, what really stinks is because we have now become so technology advanced with our healthcare system that the United States of America has the single most expensive healthcare system by far. And no one is even close to us. Maybe we would be okay with that if we were ranked number 1 in the world in overall health status and infant mortality rating, where that is a joke, because it's safer for a baby to be born in Cuba than it is to be born here in the United States of America. And let's not even start ranking Northwest Indiana. This is the truth of the matter. We are paying more than ever than we ever have as a nation in our history. It is the number 1 reason families go into bankruptcy every year. Medical bills, that is. Listen to this. Not only what your insurance company pays, The average American pays nearly $10,000 out of pocket every single year between their deductibles, copays, and all the other junk that isn't covered. So can you guess what people who use chiropractic care on a regular basis have? Massive cost savings. This study was done with thousands of patients right here in the Chicagoland area. It was an HMO-based study that said, for this set of people, you're going to use a chiropractor as your primary care provider. So just like we taught earlier on this presentation, they used a chiropractor as their family doctor or their go-to doctor, their first line of defense doctor, instead of their last resort doctor. And that group compared to the other group, which used a medical doctor as their primary care provider. The chiropractic group had 60% less hospital stays, 62% less outpatient surgeries and procedures, 85% less pharmaceutical use. So what that adds up to you, moms and dads and families, is massive amounts of cost savings. Just like anything in life, from your house to your career to your education, you have to invest money up front into your child's well-being. And chiropractic care is an investment into your child's health. And that investment pays massive dividends later on. Because if you go back to what we tied through this thread the whole time, when our families who have us as their go-to family doctor, the pediatric family chiropractor, is in the first place they call from everywhere from a fever to an earache, but most importantly, they see them on a regular basis for wellness and prevention and proactive health. They go down all these other bullet points and other roads few and far between. This means spending some money up front to get your child well with regular chiropractic care. Not only do you get massive cost savings, you are teaching your kids massive healthy lifestyle habits. So you don't have to worry about your genetic destiny or so-called predetermined genes junk. Do we really want our kids growing up thinking that something is wrong with them, that they are broken, and they forever need a medication for them to be okay? By the way, that sort of programming never leaves them. That is the reason so many adults have so many problems later in life, feel shame, less than what they could have been, crap genes, the whole enchilada of unfounded medical theory based on bad scientific evidence. Again, based on rats and animals. No humans. I should say very little human evidence. So to close up, reason number 7, it's a family affair. As Paul Hawkins states, let's begin with the startling point. Moms and dads, you're going to have to figure out what it means to be a human being on Earth at a time when every living system is declining, and the rate of decline is accelerating. Kind of a mind-boggling situation. But no one peer-reviewed paper published in the last 30 years can refute that statement. Basically, civilization needs a new operating system. You, moms and dads, are the programmers, and we need it within a few decades. This planet came with a set of instructions, but we seem to have misplaced them. Important rules like don't poison the water, soil, or air, don't let the earth get overcrowded, and don't torch the thermostats have been broken. Buckminster Fuller said that spaceship Earth was so ingeniously designed that no one has a clue that we are on one, flying through the universe at 1,000,000 miles per hour with no need for seatbelts, lots of room in coach, and really good food. But all that is changing. If you look at the science about what is happening on Earth and aren't pessimistic, you don't understand the data. But if you meet the people who are working to restore this Earth and the lives of the poor, and you aren't optimistic, you haven't got a pulse. What I see everywhere in the world are ordinary people willing to confront despair, power, and incalculable odds to restore some semblance of grace, justice, and beauty to this world. The poet Adrian Rich wrote, "So much has been destroyed, I have cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." There could be no better description. Humanity is coalescing. It is reconstituting the world, and the action is taking place in schoolrooms, farms, jungles, villages, campuses, companies, refuge camps, deserts, fisheries, slums, and Northwest community impact. You join a multitude of caring people. No one knows how many groups and organizations are working on the most salient issues of our day: climate change, poverty, deforestation, peace, water, hunger, conservation, human rights, true health care, not just based on sickness and disease, not evidence based on rats and animals, and more. This is the largest movement the world has ever seen. Rather than control, it seeks connection. Rather than dominance, it strives to disperse concentrations of power. Like Mercy Corps, it works behind the scenes and gets the job done. Large as it is, no one knows the true size of this movement. It provides hope, support, and meaning to billions of people in the world. Its clout resides in idea, not in force. It is made up of teachers, children, peasants, business peoples, moms and dads, rappers, organic farmers, nuns, artists, government workers, fisherfolk, engineers, students, writers, weeping Muslims, concerned mothers, poets, doctors without borders, grieving Christians, street musicians, the President of the United States of America, and as the writer David James Duncan would say, the Creator, the one who loves us, all in such a huge way. There is a rabbinical teaching that says that the world is ending and the Messiah arrives. First plant a tree, and then see if the story is true. Inspiration is not garnered from the litanies of what may befall us. It resides in humanity's willingness to restore, redress, reform, rebuild, recover, reimagine, and reconsider. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Through the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, is Mary Oliver's description of moving away from the profane toward a deep sense of connectedness to the living world. Millions of people are working on behalf of strangers, even if the evening news is usually about the death of strangers. And this kindness of strangers has religious, even mythic origins and very specific 18th century roots. Abolitionism was the movement that ended slavery, the first people to create a national and global movement to defend the rights of those they did not know. Until that time, no group had filed a grievance except on behalf of itself. The founders of this movement were largely unknown: Granville Clark, Thomas Clarkson, Josiah Wedgwood, and the goal was ridiculous on the face of it. At that time, 3 out of 4 people in the world were enslaved. Enslaving each other was what human beings had done for ages, and the abolitionist movement was greeted with incredulity. Conservative spokesmen ridiculed the abolitionists as liberals, progressives, do-gooders, meddlers, and activists. They were told they would ruin the economy and drive England into poverty. But for the first time in history, a group of people organized themselves to help people they would never know, from whom they would never receive direct or indirect benefit. And today, tens of millions of people do this every day. It's called the world of nonprofits, civil society, schools, social entrepreneurship, non-governmental organizations, and companies who place social and environmental justice at the top of their strategic goals. The scope and scale of this effort is unparalleled in history. The living world is not out there somewhere, but in your heart. What do we know about life? In the words of biologist Janine Benyus, life creates the conditions that are conducive to life. When solving a design problem, look to nature first. Then you'll find inspired designs for making things waterproof, aerodynamic, solar-powered, natural healthcare, and more. I can think of no better model for a future economy. We have tens of thousands of abandoned homes without people, and tens of thousands of abandoned people without homes. We have failed bankers advising failed regulators on how to save failed assets. We are the only species on the planet without full employment. Brilliant. We have an economy that tells us that it is cheaper to destroy Earth in real time rather than renew, restore, and sustain it. You can print money to bail out a bank, but you can't print life to bail out a planet. At present, we are stealing the future, selling it in the present, and calling it gross domestic product. We can just as easily have an economy that is based on healing the future instead of stealing it. We can either create assets for the future or take the assets of the future. One is called restoration and the other exploitation. And whenever we exploit the earth, we exploit people and cause untold suffering. Working for the earth is not a way to get rich. It is a way to be rich. This extraordinary time when we are globally aware of each other and the multiple dangers that threaten civilization has never happened. Not in 1,000 years, not in 10,000 years. Each of us is as complex and beautiful as all the stars in the universe. We have done great things, and we have gone way off course in terms of honoring creation. Moms and dads, we are bestowing upon something most amazing, stupefying challenge ever bequested to any generation. The generations before you failed. They didn't stay up all night. They got distracted and lost sight of the fact that life is a miracle every moment of your existence. Nature beckons you to be on her side. You couldn't ask for a better boss. The most unrealistic person in the world is the cynic, not the dreamer. Hope only makes sense when it doesn't make sense to be hopeful. This is your century, Mom and Dad. Take it and run at it as if your life and your family's life depends on it. Within the vast network of every species is a particular genome, a blueprint. Within this blueprint contains the genetic code, the essence of life itself. It does not make mistakes. It does not mutate spontaneously. It does not give rise to a sicker offspring. Mankind has evolved and adapted to the natural elements of tens of thousands of years, which has allowed a supreme being, made in the image and likeness of God. Contained on this blueprint, this recipe of life, exists the formula each species require in order to reproduce, to survive, and to thrive in life. Each offspring co-evolves to a more superior form, causing a gradual modification of a species' structures and features as it responds to its environment. This expressive, adaptive physiology is designed to survive the harshest of the natural elements, to ensure life, to ensure reproduction, to ensure a more perfect offspring, so long as this natural evolution is not interfered. It will continue to flourish, to grow, to move, and express an improved form of life, generation after generation. Within the last century, hundreds, perhaps thousands, even tens of thousands of man-made chemicals and toxins have been found in the fetal blood. It is these exposures that cause genetic deformities, mutations, so-called mistakes. Today, our offspring, who is surviving these toxins, are merely an adaptive expression of a human organism struggling to survive the onslaught of this synthetic new biology. What we are learning from science is that within this code reveals a set of instructions, a specific set of requirements, how well we eat, move, think, connect, and cope with stress as a member of the human species. So long as we, as a community, choose a lifestyle that is congruent for our genome, one that mimics Mother Nature, one that protects our ecology, one that protects and safeguards our central nervous system, our genetic expression will continue to evolve to a greater offspring. Our choices as to how we choose to eat, move, think, connect, and cope with stress is mankind's best natural pharmacy. What is more promising to us? Our understanding of the human genome has led science to a new paradigm shift. We know through science exactly what kinds of food, exercise, mindsets, nurturing, and coping mechanisms humans require. This is the essence of the human blueprint, our 5 pillars. To continue our present path with big food and big pharma is a biological war that is endangering humanity. Just like dozens of species that are going extinct each day, humanity may follow.